Hey, welcome back to Game 5 from 62 Most Instructive Games, the book by Irving Chernev. I'm just going through this book. Well, I've already been through it once, but I'm going through now. I'm making YouTube videos about the ones that I think are particularly instructive. And today I'm going to be looking at Game 5, which is a game between Rubinstein and Duras. Sorry. So the last video was a rook and pawn endgame, quite complicated, and the video was quite long with lots of little variations that I looked at. This game is a lot more simple, but its simplicity is part of its beauty, I think. So this might be a bit of a quicker video, but nonetheless extremely instructive. So Rubinstein starts with d4. We get d5, knight f6, knight f3, c5, e3, knight f6, and d takes c5. And here black plays an inaccuracy quite early on. He plays queen a5 check to win the pawn back on the next move. A better way to go about it is simply playing e6, and if white really tries to hold on to the pawn with b4, then you can undermine it with a5, c3, a takes b4, c takes b4, and then b6, and the pawn falls. Or if white wants to be really keen on keeping that pawn on c5, and he plays bishop a3, then we would see b takes c5, and then the rook takes a3, and after the knight retakes we get queen a5 with check, and black wins 2 pieces for the rook, and it's just better. So e6 was the way to go. In the game we get queen to a5 check, and Rubinstein blocks with knight b to d2 rather than knight to c3, so he's not blocking his c-pawn, and black wins the pawn back with queen takes c5. We get a3, queen to c7, c4, and d takes c4. Here black, it's another sort of mistake. He's just helping white to develop. So we get knight takes c4, bishop to g4. Again, another little bit of a mistake. Lasker famously recommended developing knights before bishops, largely because we don't always know where we want our bishops to be immediately. So it's worth just waiting for that. But yeah, here we get bishop g4. We get b4 by white, knight to c6, bishop b2, and b5, just kicking away this knight, but missing something. A brilliant move by Rubinstein, where Rubinstein can go knight to c to e5. And it looks like it shouldn't be possible because this knight on f3 is pinned. But we get knight takes e5, knight takes e5, giving up the queen. Bishop takes queen on d1. Bishop takes b5 pawn with check, and blocks with knight to d7. If instead king d8, then rook takes d1. Already looks bad, but it actually ends with mates. So we get king c8, bishop a6 check, king b8, knight c6 check, queen takes c6, bishop e5 checked, queen to d6, and then rook c1 is mate on the next move. So we get knight to d7 blocking, bishop takes d7, and queen takes d7. Again, if king d8, then rook takes d1, and there's all sorts of horrible threats. So black is forced to give the queen back. Knight takes d7, and now black retreats the bishop to h5. There's not really many good places for the bishop to go. Sort of wherever black moves that bishop, white is going to move the knight back to safety with tempo, or play rook to c1 with tempo if the bishop went to c2. Here on h5, it looks like white can't retreat the knight with tempo, which is true. So we get knight to e5, then rook to c8, and here g4. And this is why the bishop is misplaced on h5. So we get bishop g6, and knight takes g6. This is obviously a crucial strategic decision from white here to trade off this bishop. But the reason for doing it is, well, in this position, black has the two bishops. So first of all, we don't want them to have the advantage of the two bishops. But also, this is black's active bishop. This bishop is dead on f8 for the time being. So you're leaving black with their with their inactive bishop, and it has a sort of deeper strategic purpose as well, which we'll see later into the game. But yeah, for now it's just about taking away the bishop pair. Obviously, black in return gets an semi-open file for his rook after h takes g6. We get bishop d4, a nicely placed bishop, a6, just to defend that pawn, and now king d2. So this, first of all, it connects the rooks, but the advantage of doing this over, say, castles is that the king stops the rook from infiltrating to c2, so it just controls that infiltration square. We get f6. Black wants to play e5 to open up the bishop and also to kick away white's strong bishop on d4. And then rook a c1, offering a rook trade. And black has to decide between giving up the c-file or trading the rooks and hopefully targeting that h2 pawn. But we'll see what happens. So we get rook takes c1, rook takes c1. This is better than king takes c1 because we want the rook to be active in the endgame rather than babysitting the h-pawn. So white gladly gives up that h-pawn. You'll see that the rook is targeting this undefended pawn on h2 now. First of all, black plays e5. If black plays rook takes h2 first, we'd get something like rook to c8 check, king to f7, king e2 defending the f2 pawn, and then e5, bishop c5, bishop takes c5, rook takes c5, and then it looks like black is in time. If he goes rook to h8, it looks like he's in time to get behind that a pawn on a8 and just defend this weak pawn. But white has this check on c7, and then after king e6, another check to pick up the pawn. So black loses the pawn in this variation. So rather than taking the pawn straight away, black plays e5, comes with tempo, so it makes a lot of sense as well. Bishop c5, and now black takes that pawn. If bishop takes first, then we get rook takes, rook to h2, king e2, e4, and rook to a5 picks up the pawn. If delaying h2 in this position and plays king to d7, then again just rook to a5. The rook can swing across to a8, but then you have b5 as the pawn is pinned. Obviously, if a takes, then the rook is hanging. So after bishop c5, we get rook takes straight away, which means bishop takes f8, king takes f8, king e2, protecting f2, e4, and rook to c6, targeting that pawn, and rook to g2. Rook to g2 works better now because of this pawn on e4, stops the king from coming to f3. So that was black's plan. Obviously, he goes into this knowing that white is going to pick up the a pawn, and in return, black will get the g4 pawn. And if we take a look at this situation here now, the material is now equal. Way back in the opening, when white gave up the queen, in that combination, white initially wins a pawn. I forgot to mention that. But now, after giving up the h2 pawn and the g4 pawn, the material is actually equal. But we can see that white's passed pawns are much stronger than black's. White's got connected passed pawns on the queen side, with no pawns or pieces on the queen side for black to prevent these from being pushed. Whereas it's much, much harder for black to make progress with their majority on the king side. We can see that the g pawns are doubled, but not only that, the white king and 2 pawns are over here to slow them down as well. So this is the strategic kind of brilliance of this game from Rubinstein. If we go all the way back to here, for example. So Rubinstein can see that he's got this pawn majority on the queen side, and that all of black's pieces, except for the rook and the bishop, are on the king side, including the black king, of course. So these 2 pieces of black's that could contribute to the defense of the queen side, white just eliminates those. So takes the bishop, so that's 1 less active piece, and then offers a rook trade to get rid of this rook that's also on the king side. And once those pieces are traded, you can see there's this weak pawn on a6, and white has a rook on the queen side to target that, and black has nothing on the queen side to defend it. So that is the beauty of this game, and that's what I feel is most instructive. Just the fact that white allows black to be distracted on the wrong side of the board, and forces this situation, which he can see is clearly winning, even from this position. So yeah, obviously, from this point, black tried to gain counterplay on the king side, but what we can see is the queen side play is much stronger for white than black's king side. So Rubinstein was never in trouble, and he knew that very early on. So in this position, Rubinstein plays a rook to a7, instinctively just cutting off that king, controlling the 7th rank. We get rook to g1, b5, start pushing these pawns, rook to b1, a4, g5. I mean, black has to try and do something on the king side. It's the only area that he's got some play. We get rook to b7, rook to a1, and then here is a nice trick. So rather than trying to keep both of these pawns defended, white has a nice trick here. And maybe I'll do my first ever pause the video moment. Like, pause the video here and try and figure out the fastest way for white to win this game. And I'll have a sip of coffee. So in this position, Rubinstein played b6, giving up the a pawn, and black actually takes the a pawn. So we'll see Rubinstein's plan. We get first rook to a7. Obviously, black can't accept the trade here, so we get rook to b4, then b7, and now that pawn is well, it's either getting promoted or black has to give up the rook. There's no other way around it. So we get g4. So obviously white's threat is to go rook a8 with check and then promote the pawn. So let's say if black went to f7, then this pawn would promote anyway with check. So that's much worse. Obviously this doesn't quite work. If the king was on g8 and could hide on h7, then this b7 push to b8 doesn't come with check and doesn't work. So there's some nuances to the trick. It's not as quite straightforward as it might initially seem. Obviously Rubinstein saw all of this. But anyway, black knows that they can't avoid this, so they're going for g4, some counterplay. Rook a8 check, as was threatened, king f7, pawn promotes, and then black has to give up the rook. And obviously here it's already kind of obvious that it's lost, but maybe black can do something with the kingside majority. I mean, yeah, I would certainly just resign here. It seems very unlikely, but anyway, we get king e6, rook e8 check, king f5, and then king f1, and this is where black resigned. Yeah, it really truly is just pointless to continue if something like g6, king g2, g5, rook to e7, a little waiting move, king has to go to g6, and then you're picking up one of these pawns, and it's just hopeless. So black resigned in this position. I think this is, yeah, a very underrated game, especially for the intermediate player. I mean, how many times have you had a 2 versus 1 pawn majority on the queenside and just not really known how to take the fullest advantage from it? And this is just so beautifully simple how Rubinstein shows how to do it. Obviously, it relies a lot on black playing poorly in the opening, but again, your opponents are going to do that too. So let's quickly look at the lessons from this game. I think quite simple points to remember. Firstly, on the opening, just in general, yeah, we're all taught this, but sometimes we don't do it. We don't bring our queen out too early unless there is a real reason to do so. You don't allow your opponent to easily develop. And as Alaska says, usually develop your knights before bishops, again, unless there is a real purpose for it. And then when you see your opponent playing strangely like this in the opening, you've got to figure out how you can punish it, like Rubinstein did here. All his moves came with tempo. He took advantage of the fact that the opponent's king was still in the center, that all the pieces on the king side hadn't developed, and he played it perfectly to get to this winning endgame. And then the final point, which is like the main point of this game, I would say, is that when you have a pawn majority on one side of the board, you should check if you can trade off pieces, at least on that side of the board. I mean, ideally, you want to trade off as many pieces as possible. King and pawn endgames are usually the most winning endgames, especially when you've got a pawn majority on one side. But yeah, Rubinstein shows that it's enough just to trade pieces on the side of the board where you've got the pawn majority and just keep the remaining pieces on the other side of the board distracted with other things. So yeah, very nice game by Rubinstein there. Very simple one. He's one of my favorite players, I think. I really enjoy watching his games. He does make it sort of look a bit effortless, kind of like Capablanca. And yeah, I thought this was a doozy. So yeah, I included it in my videos. I hope it's useful for you as well, and I will see you in the next video.